Warning: the video you are about to watch is based on real criminal events. It contains violence and disturbing material. Viewer discretion is advised. Richard Ramirez was born in Texas in 1960. His childhood was far from ordinary. He grew up surrounded by violence, fear, and instability. At a young age, he was introduced to drugs. By adolescence, he had become withdrawn, angry, and consumed by dark thoughts. His cousin Miguel, a Vietnam War veteran, had a particularly strong influence on him, sharing graphic war stories and photographs that left a deep mark on Ramirez's mind. Violence began to feel normalized to him. In his youth, he moved to California. When he arrived in Los Angeles, he had no money, no steady job, only a growing anger inside him. He started with petty crimes: burglary, car theft, drug use. He lived on the streets, stayed in cheap motels, and drifted through a chaotic lifestyle. But that same instability gave him the freedom to roam the city at night. Ramirez did not have a specific victim profile. For him, it was about control, fear, and power. He selected homes, slipped inside at night, and attacked people in their sleep. The randomness made him even more terrifying because no one felt safe. When the first murder occurred in 1984, no one realized it was the beginning of a serial killer's reign. But by the summer of 1985, Los Angeles had become a city of fear. Newspapers ran headlines. Television stations reported new attacks almost every night. As police tried to track the suspect, paranoia spread throughout the city. Richard Ramirez was no longer just a criminal. He was becoming a dark figure shaped by media attention. With his long hair, gaunt face, and cold stare, he drew attention even inside the courtroom. He embraced satanic symbolism and seemed to feed off the fear he created. But this was only the beginning. At the time, Ramirez was a 24-year-old drifter surviving on small crimes. He roamed the streets at night, watching houses, looking for opportunities. The violence growing inside him was no longer containable. On the night of June 28, 1984, 79-year-old Jenny Vincal was alone in her home. Ramirez entered through an unlocked window. She was asleep. The attack was quick and silent. He stabbed her to death, stole a few belongings, and disappeared into the darkness. At first, the murder appeared to be a routine burglary gone wrong. Police found no clear signature linking it to a serial offender. The city moved on. No one knew it was the start of something far worse. But for Ramirez, it was a threshold. He had killed for the first time. He had felt absolute control over another human life. And that feeling opened a door that could never be closed. Months passed. Silence followed, until the spring of 1985. It was March 1985. Los Angeles nights were still warm, but tension was building. Months had passed since the first murder, and no one connected the 1984 killing to a larger pattern. Richard Ramirez struck again. On the night of March 17, 1985, 22-year-old Maria Hernandez was at home. Ramirez forced his way inside. He aimed a gun at her and pulled the trigger. The bullet struck her face, but miraculously, she survived. It deflected off a set of keys she was holding. When his gun jammed, Ramirez didn't panic. He immediately moved to the neighboring apartment. There, he encountered 34-year-old Dale Okazaki. This time, he fired successfully. Dale Okazaki was killed at the scene. This attack marked a turning point. This was no longer a random burglary. It was a violent, armed assailant escalating rapidly. The victim selection still appeared random. 2 women in the same apartment complex. One survived, one did not. Maria Hernandez's testimony became crucial. She had seen the attacker's face, a young, thin, dark-haired man. It was the first clear physical description police had, but the city had not yet heard the name Night Stalker. Ramirez was accelerating, and the summer of 1985 would turn into a nightmare for Los Angeles. By the spring of 1985, the attacks no longer seemed like a coincidence. Fear was spreading, though no one yet understood how far it would go. On the night of March 27, 1985, Richard Ramirez selected another home. His targets were 64-year-old Vincent Zazzara and his 44-year-old wife, Maxine Zazzara. After midnight, he quietly entered their house. Vincent was asleep on the couch. Ramirez raised his gun and fired. He then went into the kitchen, grabbed a knife, and moved toward the bedroom where Maxine was. Maxine Zazzara was attacked. Ramirez bound her and demanded valuables. That night was not just about killing, it was about control, humiliation, and domination intertwined. Maxine was brutally murdered.
There was one detail in this case that shifted the direction of the investigation. As Ramirez fled the scene, the imprint of his shoe was left behind on the ground. The print belonged to a rare sneaker brand, Avia. Police now had tangible physical evidence. The extreme violence in the attack also drew intense media attention. These were no longer seen as isolated murders, but as links in a growing chain. Fear was spreading across Los Angeles. People installed bars on their windows, gun sales increased, and neighborhood watch groups began patrolling the streets. But the real nightmare would begin in the summer of 1985. By the time summer arrived in 1985, Los Angeles was no longer a peaceful city. Doors were double-locked, windows were checked repeatedly, and people startled at the smallest sound. The press had given him a name, Night Stalker. In May 1985, the attacks escalated. On the night of May 14th, Richard Ramirez targeted 66-year-old Mabel Bell in her home. She was severely beaten and shot, but survived. That same night, just a few miles away, 83-year-old Mary Cannon was attacked. She was critically injured, but also lived. Ramirez was now entering multiple homes in a single night. The panic intensified. The attacker was not staying in one neighborhood. On May 29, 1985, the violence darkened further. 84-year-old Malvina Keller was attacked in her home and killed. Only hours later, 80-year-old Ruth Wilson was assaulted. Wilson survived and stated that she had seen the attacker's face. Police were now certain the crimes were connected. The shoe print appeared again, the same Avia sole pattern. By July 1985, the victims were no longer only elderly. On July 20th, 16-year-old Whitney Bennett was brutally beaten in her home, but miraculously survived. Just 2 days later, on July 22nd, 32-year-old Mary Louise Cannon and 35-year-old Leila Niding were attacked in their homes. Cannon was killed. Niding survived. Ramirez's methods varied, but the pattern remained the same. Night, home invasion, control. And another disturbing detail emerged. At some crime scenes, satanic symbols were left behind. Pentagrams were drawn on walls. Victims were told to swear allegiance to Satan. Media coverage exploded. He was no longer portrayed as just a killer, but as a satanic figure. Los Angeles could not sleep in the summer heat. But his biggest mistake was still to come. By the end of the summer of 1985, Los Angeles was on edge. News broadcasts showed the same composite sketch every night. A thin man with long hair and dark, piercing eyes. Richard Ramirez was not hiding, but he was cautious. Still, he was beginning to make mistakes. On the night of August 24th, 1985, 29-year-old Bill Carnes and his fiancée, 27-year-old Inez Erickson, were at home. Ramirez entered through the back door. He shot Bill in the head. Bill was critically injured but survived. Ramirez then bound Inez, assaulted her, and forced her to look at his face. Inez Erickson survived. And this was the crucial detail. She saw his face clearly. Police updated the composite sketch based on her description. At the scene, another critical mistake had been made. Ramirez left dental impressions and fingerprints behind. The Avia shoe print was also found again. Pressure was mounting. The media repeated his name daily. Night Stalker headlines filled the city.
On August 31st, 1985, Ramirez traveled by bus to Tucson, Arizona. But his photograph was now in newspapers. His identity was close to being fully uncovered. And then it happened. When Ramirez returned to Los Angeles, a neighborhood resident recognized him and shouted. People gathered. Ramirez tried to run. He was chased through the streets. A group of civilians caught him and beat him. By the time police arrived, the crowd was close to lynching him. There was irony in it. The man who had terrorized a city for months was ultimately captured by the city itself. He was 25 years old when he was arrested. The trial lasted for years. During court appearances, he stared at cameras, smiled, and displayed a pentagram drawn on his palm. In one hearing, he shouted, "Hail Satan!" The media amplified his dark image, and he seemed to thrive on it. In 1989, he was convicted of 13 murders, along with numerous counts of rape and burglary. The jury sentenced him to death. When the verdict was read, he showed no visible reaction. He remained cold and composed.
However, due to California's lengthy appeals process, the execution was never carried out. Years passed. The Night Stalker was confined to a prison cell. On June 7, 2013, at the age of 53, he died in prison due to health complications. For Los Angeles, the nightmare ended in 1985, but the mark he left behind never faded. Because the most terrifying aspect of Ramirez was not only the murders he committed, it was the randomness. Whether the door was locked, whether the lights were on or off. What made him different was that he did not choose specific types of victims. Anyone could become a target. The Night Stalker died, but the fear that gripped Los Angeles that summer became part of the city's history forever.